Hi everyone, it's welcome back to Lime Green. Today I'm here with my RC car and I'm just filming, but my dad's gonna fix it. He's here too. So let's just get started, I guess.
So why did you break it, Henry?
I didn't try to.
Henry replaced the motor on the ECX ruckus with a brushless motor, and it's a little bit too powerful for the transmission. So we think he stripped the gears on the inside. We've already kind of taken it apart, but we'll take it apart here and show you how to fix it. This is for the ECX ruckus. First, you have to take this cover off. We've already loosened it. There's 3 bolts here.
Make sure you remember which length they are. Or are they all the same
No,
length?
these are all the same length, but they're just a small Allen head. There's 3 of them, and this cover comes off. Then there's 2 bolts in here to remove your motor.
Already done.
We've already taken the bolts out for the transmission, but there's 2 on top, and there's a bunch on the bottom, and then there's this cover that you have to remove. So once you take everything off, you can pull the transmission out. We're just going to leave the drive shafts on for now, so we'll pull them out. And there's 2 set screws in the end of the drive shafts that you have to take out. They unscrew, but we already loosened them. They're just Allen heads again. So you pull those out. Just make sure you put everything someplace where you're not going to lose it and you know where it goes. These just pull off and the drive shafts come off. You'll see there's 4 screws to take this whole transmission assembly apart. Just be careful when you're taking it apart, because some of the screws are longer than the other ones, so you have to remember where they go. They're just Phillips head screws. So these 2 screws right here that I just took out are the longer of the 2 screws. See, they go in the back. And these 2 front ones are the shorter ones, so just remember where they go when you put it back together. Don't put the long ones in the wrong holes,
Because then it's not going to work right.
See how much shorter these are? See the short ones and the long ones?
Subtle difference, but...
Alright, the next step is you have to take your spur gear off. So just hold the spur gear. We use a tool for the tires, it's the same size. I don't know what size it is, it might be like an 8mm.
Oh yeah, I totally destroyed that transmission.
Just take this spring off. And then this gear right here just pulls off. You just got to work it back and forth. Alright, so now all the screws are out. You can see there's 2 case halves. We're going to pull it apart and see what damage is done. It should just slide apart. Just kind of keep an eye on it so you know where everything goes when you take it apart. But you can see these have plastic gears.
It's destroyed.
And you see this gear right here. And this one right here. This one has no teeth left on it.
It's just absolutely destroyed.
So if you're running one of these with a brushless motor, you're probably best to upgrade before you strip out the gears, because these plastic gears
are not going to hold long.
They're not designed to hold that kind of power. So you can see this is the differential, and here's the gears. So we'll set those aside. So we went to Hobbytown today, and you can see this is what we're going to replace it with. Part number is ECX 9001. It's the metal gear set for the 2-wheel drive. And you can see the difference in the gears. We'll obviously have to take this apart and put this gear on it.
How do we do that?
Well, we'll find out in a minute. It looks like these bearings just pull off because you can see the gear has to go onto this shaft. So you're going to want to pull the spacer and the bearing off, and this gear should just push off.
Might take a little force.
And you'll see it's got slots cut for this. So the new gear right here, you want to make sure those slots go into that
little peg thing.
Yep. And then you put the bearing back on.
Make sure they're in the right order.
Yep, because that peg will come out, so just be careful. Make sure you get it seated in there really well. And then this spacer goes back on. So set that stuff aside for now. And you'll see there's a bearing in here that we need to transfer over. So this gear is going to replace this gear, and you have two bearings in there that you have to get out. So I'm just going to take a needle nose pliers, push one bearing out, and you can push the other bearing out. So there's no bearing left in there. Just take the new bearings
and pop them in.
Push them in there. There you go. So now we have to reassemble the transmission. You don't have to do anything with this differential. It comes pre-assembled. Everything's good to go. It already has the bearings pressed on, so you shouldn't have to do anything with that. We'll start with this side. And this just goes into there. Just make sure everything turns freely when you get it in. So you got to put the two case halves back together. Just make sure you have this bearing and bushing on there. And just kind of line everything up and press it together. Once it's pressed together, make sure it turns freely. So if there's any binding, take it back apart and see what you did wrong. But remember earlier we had the two longer screws
versus the shorter screws.
And then the two shorter screws. If you put them in the wrong holes, the longer screws will poke out the side and ruin your case, so don't do that. Just snug them up. You don't want to tighten them too tight because you'll strip them out, but make sure they are tight because you don't want them to back out. Once the case is together, you shouldn't have a gap anywhere around it, and it should spin freely. Now we need to put the spur gear back on. You'll see there's a offset hole there. Just make sure you get it lined up. It should snap on. And you take your spring and just hold the gear. I think this is an 8mm if I remember right. And just tighten it up. You don't want to leave it too loose, but you don't want it super tight either. That spring will keep it from coming loose. Again, just make sure everything turns freely. So this is ready to assemble back on the car. Just make sure when you put your motor in, you get the mesh right on your gears. You don't want it too far out, you don't want it too far in.
Grab the drive shafts.
The drive shafts go back on. One side is got threaded holes, and the other side is smooth. You just line them up, and you take the pins,
poke them through there,
poke them back in. Sometimes they're tough to get in. So just take these screws and make sure they're pushed all the way in. And just take the correct size Allen head and tighten them up. This is just an easier way of getting the transmission out, so you don't have to do this on the car because they're kind of small and it's hard to get your hands in there sometimes.
Yeah.
So what we do is take this, line it up,
Make sure it's on the right side, otherwise it won't line up right.
we have these backwards because we've replaced this axle a few times. So
Uh-huh.
yours will be different than this, but
Yeah.
it's the same concept. And you got to kind of get this underneath, and then it just lines up. So you just put your
Motor in there.
motor back in. You got this goes on the bottom, and you got 4 screws. These 4 screws on the bottom that you have to take off, and then these 2 take the motor out.
How come you need to do these two?
Because that's what holds the transmission in.
Ah.
There's 4 screws that hold the transmission in on the bottom, and then you have 2 on the top here, and then these bolt back here. So technically you have 8 total screws to take out to remove this from the car. So we kind of fast forward a little bit and we put all the screws in. So these are all the screws that you need to put back in. These 2 hold the top of the transmission to the body. Then you've got 4 on the bottom.
You're a very fast screwer inner.
Then you have these 2, which you can see they move on a. That's how you set the gear mesh. On this one, we have to have it up pretty much all the way in because the motor is bigger than the factory one. So I'm just going to kind of hold it and tighten it down. You want these pretty tight, but don't strip them out because they just go into the aluminum motor. So the last thing you got to do is there is a cover. With these 3 screws.
The transmission doesn't get pelted by rocks, probably.
Ours has a hole in it because our motor shaft is longer. Yours won't have this hole if you're not running a brushless. But you want to put this on because, like Henry said, it keeps rocks and garbage out of there, so you'll strip out your gears. But it just sets on there,
And
then you got Allen head screws, 3 of them. Alright guys, see how smooth that is? You shouldn't have any weird noises. There shouldn't be any binding. It should just be smooth. So this is a great way to upgrade your ECX ruckus if you're going to run a brushless motor system. Our next upgrade will be the shafts because Henry keeps
snapping them,
spinning the shafts. So we'll be back with another video on those.
And yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Alright guys, hope this helped you with your transmissions on your ECS ruckus.
Don't forget to subscribe. Bye.